It was a bright day, and yet its beauty was a mockery to Stephen Carter in his grieving state. In his mind the same sights kept playing with no end. Black smoke rising from a burning house, 2 corpses, one of the woman, one of a child, halfway burned, furniture destroyed and family heirlooms taken, but the fire had been the worst. The fire that had denied him to save those dead bodies, like a creature from hell telling him that those souls were now and forever beyond his reach. As if the flames took pleasure in seeing him suffer, they had devoured his home and family. The Union soldiers had done nothing but plunder and steal. None had helped him to put out the fire even after they'd realized. Quite the contrary, blaming the haze of war, they'd vanished as if the house had caught fire by itself. But Carter knew. He knew it hadn't been a coincidence. He knew how houses were set ablaze just to feed the North's satisfaction, and yet he had been foolish enough to believe they might distinguish friend from foe, even if both were of Southern origin. His fury had demanded for him to take hold of the soldiers, shaking each one of them until they would tell him who had been responsible for the disaster. He would have liked to shoot them, or at least give them a bleeding nose. Stephen Carter, however, had done none of those things. Instead, he had bottled up his anger until he would have proof and his superior's blessing to go on with his investigation. He was a Union soldier. They couldn't deny him justice. Carter didn't slow down when he reached the Union camp. With brisk steps, he went right to the tent of the colonel. His still lingering anger let him barely wait until he was let in. "Captain Carter," the colonel addressed him with a rather baffled expression. After mustering the Union soldier, he added, "What's the trouble?" "Sir, I've seen the..." He paused to find the most suitable word. "Distraction caused by the army." Carter stopped, but when his superior waited for a more specific explanation, he continued. "As you surely know, my home lies here in this very state, even if Georgia is part of the Confederacy." Carter could feel the colonel's impatience. He was occupied with other, more pressing matters. "Today I found my house in ruin," the captain stated plainly, barely keeping his anger out of his voice. "This is war, Captain," his superior said in a dismissive tone. Damaging civilian property is one of its negative consequences. The disinterest regarding the Southerners' suffering infuriated him even more. "This was not an accident. I saw them leave." "Who?" "That's what I'm here for. I only saw them from a distance, but I'm sure I will recognize them. So it was no one of this regiment. They were General Sherman's men." A steely look from the colonel let Carter calm down a bit. If this were Washington, someone would be hanged for this. But it isn't Washington. We are in rebel territory, and if you cannot name who you thought you saw, Captain, then we can't do anything. The unwillingness to help poured oil into the raging fire, causing Carter to walk right up to the colonel's desk. "They burned my home!" he yelled with his hand slamming down. The open ink bottle fell over, spilling its contents over the table and newly written letter. The colonel didn't get up. He merely raised his eyes to look at the enraged man. "Captain, I recommend you soothe your temper," the officer remarked with icy calm while they stared at each other. Neither of them blinked and neither of them backed down. "This matter is finished. I am sorry for your loss." "Hell you are," Carter hissed, whipping around and stomping out of the tent. In his mind, the flames kept rising high into the sky, licking at the wooden structure that once had been home. His hands felt the cold, charred corpses as he had carried them to their graves, and with each step and each picture in his head, the fury built until it was a tempest he could barely contain. But he was powerless to do anything about it. He didn't know the names of the ones who had done it, and even if he doubted the army would help. For the first time in 15 years, Carter wondered if they even considered him as one of their own. He stopped and looked up towards the blue sky. He felt how tired he was after the emotional turmoil he had gone through. Sherman wouldn't move on today. He might as well get some rest, if there would be rest for him. The scream of a woman let Carter spring to his feet. "Lisa," he whispered, bathed in sweat and still half asleep. An owl hooted outside, dragging him back into the present. He rubbed his eyes in an attempt to clear his head. "She's dead, you fool," he scolded himself in the same hushed voice. She was gone, her body buried hastily in a shallow grave, as was his son. He would never hear their voices again. Not really. Again the owl hooted, driving Carter into a new frenzy. Taking his colt, he stepped outside, his mind set on shooting the damn bird. Cocking the pistol, he looked around. There on his tent sat an owl twice as large as a cat and with feathers ranging from steel gray to coal black. Its yellow eyes stared right into Carter's, and to him it felt as if they glowed like the fire that had devoured his life. It hooted again, a relaxed, knowing and yet mocking sound, at least to him in his mad state. When he raised his weapon, the bird spread its wings, swooped down from the tent and right over his head, missing him by mere inches. Turning around, Carter sought to take aim again, but like a ghost, the owl was gone. Not another hoot came from the forest around. A fire crackled in the center of the camp. A few privates sat around it. Most had already gone to sleep. Carter looked up to estimate the time of the night. The moon was high in the sky, bathing the land in its silver glow. Feeling a sudden weakness, he decided to get back to bed. On his way, he heard two soldiers talking about recent events. "So I saved the last chick we hadn't shot yet, gave it back to the woman, and told her to make dinner." "Oh, you sly fox," the other replied, eager to hear the rest of the story. "You should have seen their faces when I came back to get my dinner." Carter clenched his fist at the proud tone in the first man's voice as he boasted. "Taking the last bit of food from a starving family," the other remarked with irony. "Not my fault," the first defended himself, although there was no note of regret in his tone. "We wouldn't be in this mess hadn't they turned traitor. Bushwhackers can all go to hell for all I care." Forcing himself to remain calm, Carter went inside. Maybe his father had been right when he had told his son that it was an act of betrayal to fight for the Union. His state would need him, his father had said. Carter had shut out his old man's wounded pride and not resigned from the army like so many others. To the south he was a traitor. What was he to the north? The army had betrayed him. He had fought against his home and family, and now they just treated him like any other rebel. Carter was barely aware of his hands moving as he started packing his knapsack. If he had already betrayed his state, then the least he could do was to honor his family and find their murderers. Those men around him weren't soldiers anymore. They had turned into mercenaries. They plundered and they murdered, and who knew what they had done to Lisa before she died? New fury rose up inside of him. He would kill them all, every last Yankee he found, and he would make them suffer like he suffered. Silently he slipped outside to his horse. The large chestnut pricked his ears, but uttered no sound. He was a clever horse. He knew what his rider needed, sometimes even before his rider did himself. Carter gave him a pat on the neck and then led him through the trees. Reaching the place where one soldier kept watch throughout the night, Carter planned to just walk past the other man, but emotions are tricky. They get triggered by the slightest of things. "Who's there?" "Captain Carter. I have an urgent message for the general." For Carter the conversation was done. Not for the young man, though. With a sneer he uttered, "I heard General Sherman wants to burn his way down south." "Is it true, sir?" In the blink of an eye, Carter was behind the watchman, his hand muffling any screams. The other soldier didn't stop struggling until he felt the cold steel of a knife on his throat. "Now listen well, boy," Carter said in a calm voice. "I ain't interested in harming the army. You call for help, you die. This is personal." You will answer my questions silently. Understood? The youth nodded, his face pale in the moonlight. Carter grinned through his dark beard. It wasn't a warm grin. Who told you about burning houses? The boy only shook his head. No one, sir. Just talk in camp. You think it's fun to arrest civilians? No answer. Answer me, damn you! The captain growled at the trembling soldier. As the man remained defiantly still, Carter asked another question. Where are you from, boy? Not the south. It was all he needed to know. The watch would alarm the camp as soon as he was on his way. Strangely, he felt nothing when he drove his knife into the man's side. Waiting for the soldier to die, Carter laid him on the ground. The Confederates could get his camp for all he cared. He was part of this war no longer. He had started his own, and by God, he would fight it until the end.